Hello, my friends. Unfortunately, the talks didn't take place yesterday, but they were postponed until today, and Zelensky said that negotiations will happen only out of respect for Trump and Erdogan.
Despite the relatively low level of the Russian delegation, but out of respect for President Trump, and out of respect for the high level of the Turkish delegation and President Erdogan, and with the desire to try to achieve at least the first steps toward de-escalation and ending the war, I decided to send our delegation to Istanbul. But not all of them. The delegation will be led by Ukraine's Minister of Defense, even though there won't be a counterpart from the Russian side. The meeting is supposed to take place in a format that includes Turkish, American, Ukrainian, and Russian participation. Also, Umarov is part of the negotiation team and speaks Turkish, English, Russian, and Ukrainian fluently.
And Rubio has already stated that they are not putting much hope in these talks and that Trump and Putin need to meet face to face to begin more constructive negotiations. The US Secretary of State said the US has no inflated expectations for tomorrow. He also emphasized that at this stage it's clear a breakthrough is only possible through direct personal interaction between President Putin and Trump. Rubio also added that Trump is eager to end this war because too many people are dying. But as we know, Trump is afraid to meet with Putin, otherwise, he would have done it a long time ago. He's had plenty of chances to call Putin and explain that the war needs to stop, but Trump isn't doing that and the war continues. And Zelensky said that Russia showed disrespect toward the US and Turkey by sending such low level negotiators.
I believe the United States and Turkey are feeling disrespected by Russia right now. In my opinion, no meeting time was set, no agenda provided, and the delegation wasn't high level. That's a personal insult. I'm not saying the Russians don't respect us, that much is already clear. But this reflects both ways. It's a lack of respect toward Erdogan and toward Trump. Trump is sending a major team. Secretary of State Rubio is coming. And who are the warring parties? Russia and Ukraine? Rubio will be there. Turkey's foreign minister will be there. Ukraine's foreign minister will be there. Where is the appropriate representative from the Russian Federation? This isn't just disrespect toward Ukraine, it's toward everyone. First and foremost, I believe it's disrespectful to Turkey, because the meeting is happening there.
However, the Russian negotiation team stated that the talks would begin today at 10 a.m.
The delegation arrived today in Istanbul by order of the president to conduct direct bilateral negotiations with Ukraine without any preconditions. We already had a very productive meeting with Turkey's foreign minister where we explained our position. Tomorrow morning, starting at 10 a.m., we'll be waiting for the Ukrainian side, which is expected to arrive for the meeting. We are ready to work.
Well, it will be very interesting to see how this all turns out, and meanwhile, the war continues, and on the front lines, the Russians are still advancing. So let's begin with the Toretsk direction, which is gradually transitioning into the Kostyantynivka direction. Looking at the bigger picture, it's clear that a large area is forming here that the Russians are trying to level out in order to reach Kostyantynivka. Since the battles near Chasiv Yar, they haven't been able to break through the Ukrainian defenses, so they started pushing from the south, and as we can see, they having much more success there. As of today, in the Toretsk direction, the Russians are continuing assaults within the city itself. They still haven't fully taken it. A small part remains under Ukrainian control. Fighting is also ongoing in Krymsk and Deliivka. In addition, the Russians continue storming Staramykolaiivka. However, in the past 24 hours, there have been no confirmed new advances. Still, while the Ukrainian side hasn't confirmed a breakthrough from Alexandropol to the village of Zarya, geolocated footage has already shown Ukrainian troops destroying Russian forces in that area. So, yes, A breakthrough has likely happened, and we can only hope the Russians are eliminated there. Otherwise, a large encirclement is forming. FPV drones are being used heavily here, and the entire area slowly but surely is slipping under Russian control. Despite efforts by the Ukrainian forces to hold back the attacks and inflict maximum losses, the trend is clear. It looks like the Russians will first try to straighten the front line near Zorya and then move toward Yablonivka and Klebenbysk reservoir, which would essentially allow them to strike the rear of Kostyantynivka, putting the city into a semi-encircled state. The situation here is clearly very dangerous, and we can only hope it can still be stabilized. Now to the Pokrovsk direction. As I said a few months ago, if Russia has enough resources, they'll push in two directions, toward Kostyantynivka and toward surrounding Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad. And that's exactly what's happening. They've got enough manpower, and they are splitting this section of the front in two. The movement is very obvious. So, the situation is rapidly deteriorating. Just yesterday, the Russians claimed full control over Myrolubivka and raised their flag in the village. They've also taken Malinivka. If they manage to push through to Novoekonomichne along the highway, another large area of open fields will fall under Russian control, another significant loss of territory. Fighting is ongoing, but right now the advantage is clearly with the Russians. On the offensive front, they are assaulting Udachne, pushing near Kotliny, Zvirove, and fighting continues for Lysivka. The general staff still claims fighting for Myrolubivka is ongoing, but there is confirmation that Ukrainian forces had to withdraw. Over the past 24 hours, 74 attacks were recorded and the intensity isn't decreasing. Also, yesterday, the Ukrainian forces released footage showing an attempted Russian breakthrough from Novoalexandrivka toward the village of Novomykolaivka, which is already close to the Dnipropetrovsk region. That assault was repelled. West of Novoalexandrivka, the Russians launched an armored attack toward Mykolaiivka. Our guys repelled the mechanized assault by the Russians and destroyed everything moving toward our position. So, the Ukrainian forces are still pushing back Russian assaults, but these massive attacks happen almost daily, and that's why we are seeing slow but steady Russian progress. Meanwhile, the Russians are continuing to pound Pokrovsk. Another video surfaced of a Feb 1500 bomb strike on the city. High rise buildings are being flattened, one after another. In the Kurakhove direction, Russian forces continue attacking near Kotlarivka as they try to push all the way to the Dnipropetrovsk region. However, there is unofficial information suggesting that this offensive might be halted at the border and that troops will be redeployed to hotter sectors of the front. Further south, though assaults on Oleksiivka and the village of Bahatir are still ongoing, alongside heavy shelling in the area, but over the past 24 hours there have been no confirmed changes in territorial control. The Ukrainian forces shared footage showing the destruction of another Russian tank and BMP near Bahatir. Someone got a little smoked in the area of Bahatir today. We took out a tank, a BMP-2, and a whole Russian infantry platoon. The situation in the villages remains extremely difficult. In fact, it's been hard to talk about any clear control there for a few days now. The only thing keeping this mess from spreading further is the work of neighboring units like the 79th Air Assault Brigade. They're one of the key reasons the situation hasn't collapsed entirely. In the Velika Novosilka direction, the Russians are attempting to break through around Burlatsk, and they are storming Vilna Pole and Novopil. However, following some early advances near Novosilka, the Russians haven't made any further progress here. The situation has remained unchanged over the past 24 hours. In the Zaporizhia direction, Russian forces are assaulting Stepove and shelling frontline villages. However, overall activity in this area remains low, and all previous attacks were successfully repelled by Ukrainian forces. As a result, the frontline remains unchanged. In the Kherson direction, Russian troops continue the attacks on the islands and are shelling the right bank, and nevertheless, they have been unable to make any breakthroughs, and the situation hasn't changed over the past 24 hours. In the Chasiv Yar direction, it's evident that the Russian operation has failed. The objective was to capture Chasiv Yar and advance toward Kostyantynivka, but they have been unsuccessful. Even Chasiv Yar itself remains under partial Ukrainian control. Fighting continues in the central part of the city, and Russian forces periodically attempt to advance toward Bila Hora and in the Kurdyumivka area. Despite heavy shelling, they have made no significant gains, and the front line here remains unchanged. In the Siversk direction, Russian forces continue attempts to advance near Grigorivka and are also assaulting Bilohorivka and Verkhnyo-Kamensk. Elsewhere in this sector, activity remains relatively low. Following the early capture of Verkhnyo-Kamensk, no further breakthroughs have been reported. In the Liman direction, Russian forces are assaulting Yampolivka, Kolodezi, Ritko Dub, and Druzhelyubivka. However, no significant changes have occurred in this area, as all attacks have been successfully repelled. In the Borova direction, Russian troops are conducting assaults on Nova Kruglякivka, Lozova, and Novoyegorivka. The level of activity here remains low, with only a few attacks recorded daily. As a result, Russian forces have made no notable progress, and the front line remains unchanged. In the Kupiansk direction, Russian forces are assaulting Glushkivka and conducting artillery strikes. However, activity remains minimal and no changes have been observed over the past 24 hours. In the Dvorichna direction, attacks continue in the area of Kamenka. Near the village of Topole, Russian troops have failed to achieve any gains, and the front line remains unchanged. In the Kharkiv direction, the situation remains unchanged. No new assaults or shelling have been recorded, with combat limited to the city of Vovchansk, where the front line remains stable. In the Sumy and Kursk directions, Russian forces continue to launch attacks, but activity has decreased. 8 assaults were recorded over the past 24 hours, all unsuccessful. The front line remains unchanged. President Zelensky stated that Russia has concentrated 67,000 troops in the Sumy direction and is currently regrouping for a potential large-scale offensive. The Ukrainian forces launched counterattacks in the Belgorod region and near the village of Tetkina in Kursk region in an attempt to distract and delay any Russian advance, according to Zelensky.
They began offensive actions in all directions, with Sumy being a primary focus. Indeed, 67,000 troops were observed there. We took steps to prevent them from consolidating. Now they are working to regroup and push forward with the offensive they planned. Our military reports that this offensive phase has effectively been ongoing for months.
If Russia proceeds with launching a full-scale assault on the Sumy region using this force, the overall situation on the front will undoubtedly worsen. Meanwhile, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer accused Russian President Vladimir Putin of deliberately prolonging the war and avoiding peace negotiations. Starmer stated that Putin is obstructing a ceasefire and talks between Russia and Ukraine, notably after the Kremlin refused to meet with President Zelensky in Turkey. He emphasized there is only one country that started this war, and that's Russia. We have sanctions in place, and if Putin continues to stall and refuses to come to the negotiation table for a ceasefire, we are prepared to act accordingly. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.